Hey guys, at the end of my first video on the RIOT MMO back in May, I did a little speculation at the end on what I think the RIOT MMO is. I thought I would do that again, but this time using new information and giving reasons for each point that I make along the way. Let's get into it. I want to make one thing abundantly clear. This is 99% speculation. It is speculation coming from the most informed position that is possible this early, but still speculation. Almost nothing is confirmed for this MMO other than they're making an MMO and maybe fishing. First, I think they're making an MMO with a cartoony graphic style. The main reason I say that is the Runeterra universe of games and TV shows all have that art style. And this dev team is loaded with ex-WoW devs, so it is easy for me to make that connection. And in general, I don't think it is a bad decision to go that route for an MMO. It makes making the graphics for the game quite a bit easier to develop, so the devs can focus on gameplay. It also helps with the longevity of the game. 20 years down the line, it can still look decent. Next, I think they're going for a third-person camera perspective. Why do I say that? Well, primarily because of the fact that Greg Street has made many comments about aiming big with this MMO. They are not looking to be a small or niche MMO. And in general, I believe the third-person camera has more appeal to the average MMO gamer. Also, there is a very good chance the game is being developed in Unreal Engine based on the job listings. Why would you waste the power of Unreal Engine with an isometric perspective MMO?
That just makes no fucking sense. I mean, it's just bullshit. Fuck. Oh my.
I think it will have both competitive PvE and PvP. Again, many of the lead devs come from WoW or other similar MMOs. Greg Street has also confirmed more or less that PvP exists and that raiding will be a thing. So competitive PvE seems to be a yes. Competitive PvP, I am just using my instincts here a bit and saying that it will also exist. Again, based on many of Greg Street's comments and given the background of him and other devs, I think this game ends up being a heavy theme park MMO. I do hope that it is not a 100% pure theme park and has some sandbox elements to it, but we will see about that. I think a holy trinity is very likely based on this tweet. I think a 6-man group size is quite possible based on these tweets. They will most likely have quest hubs. This seems pretty likely considering this comment. Transmog? Yeah, they will have that. I think action combat is very likely for several reasons. The main reason is one of the job listings is for Game Designer 3 action combat. That is probably more than enough confirmation. But also Greg Street's comments on MMO combat being dated add to this. I believe he's referring to tab targeting combat here. Also, Riot games tend to use action combat. Also, based on the Verb ecosystem comments, I think they have some form of combo field similar to Guild Wars 2. This is again based on the job listings that mentioned Verb ecosystems. So the Verb in this case would be the combo finishers that have different effects based on which combo field they are used in. I'm going to do a separate video explaining the system in more depth and why I really like this system and hope this is what they are referring to. I think there's plenty of room to add to what Guild Wars 2 has done with this system and make it even better. Continuing on, they have made several comments about perhaps toning down customization a bit in order to have better balance. I am in favor of this. I am all for customization, but some MMOs drastically overdo it. I played an unhealthy amount of Rift, for example, and that is one example of way too much customization. It is impossible to not have massively overpowered builds with that much customization. I also stick by the comments that this MMO can become the top MMO, unseating WoW and Final Fantasy XIV. Why do I say that? Well, first of all, to do that, it takes a war chest of money. Riot has that. Most MMO dev teams do not have that. MMOs are incredibly expensive to make, especially ones with the scope to dethrone the current kings of the genre. I also say that because that is what they seem to be aiming for based on their comments. Also, Riot's track record is stellar. They rarely have failures, and most every game they launch ends up being one of the top games in its genre. And often, it is the top game in its genre. Now, whether it becomes my personal favorite MMO, Unseating Ashes of Creation, would depend a lot on how much they innovate and move away from the WoW model. I really hope they don't just make a pure copy of WoW set in the Runeterra universe with action combat, and I don't think I am alone in those views. Listen to Asmongold's comments on MMOs not innovating and just copying others.
One of the biggest mistakes that I think MMOs make is that they don't try to be the next big MMO, they try to be the last big MMO. And I am really, really glad to see a game like this try new ideas. Try something totally fucking different. Try to actually move things and evolve things forward, right? Like, yeah, no innovation. I think that's why a game like Final Fantasy popped off so hard, is because Final Fantasy initially came out. A Realm Reborn was well liked. But when did Final Fantasy really come into its own? When it stopped trying to copy WoW and like defensive stance and fucking mana and shit like this, and it just became Final Fantasy. And that's when it was. When you played it? No, it was before it popped off before I played it. Let's be honest, okay? And so, yeah, it's new ideas.
I agree 1,000,000% with his idea here. Also, Riot is kind of known for sticking with what has historically worked and just making a highly polished experience that is very accessible. League of Legends was the first really highly polished MOBA. It was simplified compared to Dota, but would that work in the MMO genre? Final Fantasy and WoW are both already highly polished, so they can't just use that strategy this time. I'm going to make a separate video breaking this idea of innovation versus pure WoW clone, and how I hope the Riot MMO team can find a good balance. I think they probably have a highly polished MMO, great combat, great raids, but I think it'll be a shame if they don't innovate at all and just make the same game as WoW with a new skin. I think that would be a waste, but I'm trying to keep this video short and to the point. I'll talk about that more in the next video. I'll see you there.